Don't go anywhere because we have more right now on the amazing, the great heist. The greatest heist, according to President Trump, the greatest theft that's ever been done. This is bigger than Goldfinger raiding Fort Knox. This is raiding the American system of $6 trillion of money, global order. This theft has literally disrupted the American status in the world system. While, by the way, has anyone questioned, can I even say on the air that nobody wants to talk about this? Nobody wants to talk about what I'm about to talk about. And that is, why did Biden give Putin carte blanche on having a pipeline? Why did he actually take away American jobs and kill a pipeline? As a symbolic act for the environmentalist lobby here, but then authorized Putin. Remember how they were talking about, oh, Putin with Russia and Trump. This is the amazing thing. Everything they said about Trump is a lie that applies to them. How do we know that Biden isn't playing footsie with Putin because Hunter Biden's laptop has information on it that the KGB knows about, that the American intelligence community knows about, but that nobody knows about in the media because nobody has the courage to discuss it? And when Giuliani brings it up, they just raid his house and try to put him in jail. I suspect China and Russia have the goods on the Biden administration, and all they got to do is let the intelligence community know that this stuff can get leaked out from anonymous sources. It will never look like it came from them, but they can leak it. And that's enough to hold blackmail American foreign policy. Nobody says it, but we sure ought to be thinking about it. Now, someone who knows about the corruption of our institutions, the decayed and depraved state that our Department of Justice has gotten into, along with the CIA and the FBI, is General Michael Flynn. He was targeted. He was set up. They tried to take an American patriot, an American hero, and destroy him and lock him up. What would they do to you? Well, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn has something to talk about, and it has to do with these audits. And I feel like there's a divine anointing of vengeance upon him so that he can execute his moment in history to tear up the very forces that tried to destroy him and his country. Let's listen to what General Michael Flynn has to say.
When we start to do the Pennsylvania audit, the Wisconsin audit, the Georgia audit, because they are coming, folks. They are going to happen. I'm telling you, next 3 to 4 weeks, I think we're going to see a lot of truth. If there's one thing that I would say about these audits, what is the purpose of an audit? It's to discover the truth. When somebody goes, well, we've done audits in Georgia, it's like taking counterfeit money, Gene. Okay, if you don't know what you're looking at, and you have a piece of counterfeit money, and I go, yep, there's one, and yep, there's $2. Well, then I have $2, right? And I say, yep, there was $2 there. But if it's counterfeit, it's still counterfeit. If you don't know what you're looking at, then you don't know what you're looking at. That's why we have to have these true subject matter experts come in and do these forensic audits, and we really have to examine the machinery behind our vote casting. And let me just take you through another little detail, because I know we're going into a lot of different things here, but for example, for your viewers and your listeners, if I have a ballot like this, right, that was a mail-in ballot, and it doesn't have any folds on it, right, then that ballot is not a good ballot. It's an invalid ballot, okay? If I have folds on it, if it is folded, like you normally have with a ballot, and there's no envelope, right, there's no envelope, because if it's folded, that means it was put into an envelope. Well, if you have a folded ballot and there's no envelope, then it's invalid. So I'm telling you, it's not just the machines, it's the entire system. It's the entire process. And I'm telling you, no state, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia for certain have done a valid audit. Because if they did a valid audit, then we would discover the truth. And that they do not want to discover the truth. The amount of unconstitutional actions and unconstitutional behaviors. So when everybody goes, well, the courts, hey, the courts aren't going to solve our problems. We, the people, are going to solve our problems. And if you think that our election this past 3 November was done perfectly, you're nuts.
Oh, boy, well stated. You know, it's just like, we need to take a breath right now and recognize just like the Wuhan lab story. Oh, this came from the wet market. This came from tortured animals and the primitive function of eating live animals, I guess. I don't know. The bats especially as a delicacy in China. We're finding out very quickly that was a lie. And it was a lie repeated over and over again. And if you're in the scientific community, you're supposed to be trust the science. Except we're finding out that there were 23 scientists willing to compromise their integrity to sign a document as part of the cover-up, because the scientific community can be bought off. They get bought off with grants. They get bought off with job security. They get bought off with all kinds of money and favors. No, my friends, there are scientists right now that are the ones that are blowing the whistle on Wuhan. And there are scientists now in the area of data proof that are tearing the veil off of November 3rd. Let me give you a common lie, a Wuhan category lie that they're using in the election. You're here over and over again. I hear my own friends say it. Lance, they had 60 cases brought to courts, and in every one they were shot down. All right, let's get some data. I just heard Burns talk about this last night. 86 fraudulent claims were filed. 35 were dismissed on the basis of technicalities or standing, meaning that it wasn't the evidence. It was another argument that dismissed looking at the evidence. But 23 went to adjudication. Of the 23, 19 were vindicated and found fraud, but not on a sufficient scale in that test so as to overturn the entire election. So now what we have to do, we have to push the issue. So when you hear people say, oh, Trump just keeps on talking, it's already been declared. I hear ignorant people in my own clerical community quote that, and they're quoting Wuhan lies. That's what you're getting. You're getting Washington, Wuhan, Watusi. All they're doing is dancing in whatever direction is necessary in order to choreograph the takeover of the American government. Yep. But we have confidence that right now that situation is actually changing. Now, I guess unless you have a thought, Mercedes, you want to add to this, I was going to segue ever so elegantly into other aspects of government incompetence.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, just the only thing I think of is Georgia, and you heard General Flynn bring that up, and it's these secretaries of state who just rammed this election process down everybody's throat, who are, in my opinion, many of them bought off Secretary of States that went ahead and certified these elections. Governors signed off on it. And now we're doing the work in the actual audit that the general was talking about, a valid audit where we're not looking at counterfeit ballots. I mean, in Arizona, we talked about a few weeks ago, they're looking at the texture of the paper even to make sure it's the same type of paper that's being used everywhere as it should be. And so, yeah, I mean, it's phenomenal to me that it's this late in the game we're seeing it, but I'm excited it's happening now. So those were just my brief thoughts.
Yes, well, I just think that we ought to be able to talk about these things without being censored and taken off the air and threatened by the big tech companies. And as I'm sharing this information, I have this little voice in the back of my head saying, America has gotten dangerously close to losing its freedom of journalistic investigation. You see, that whole Matt DiPerno thing that bothers me most, and Maricopa, the thing that bothers me most, is its citizens and not the government, not even the state government. State fraud doesn't have the backbone to look into its own state fraud. So it's got to be the citizens.
Arizona did. I'm going to chime in there and just say Arizona is on point. They're doing their thing.
My point is, it was private citizens that had to initiate this.
True.
And then find one legislator that would have the courage to stand with them. That's my point. Mm-hmm. You got to find that one guy in Gettysburg, that one state senator in Pennsylvania who's actually standing. It's how much power is in one honest, incorruptible patriot holding office. Those are the reformers. All right, but now we're going to cut over to what in the world's happening. I made a trip last month. I didn't advertise it, I didn't publicize it. I don't know how to deal with these things publicly, but I made a trip to Central America to meet with leaders in government. And these are people, you see, because Christianity is a global movement. There are 1 billion of us out there. And we are in governments, and we are seeing a global takeover of communism and Marxism. And what the Democrats are doing on the left is part of that. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at the Guatemala trip that Kamala Harris just accomplished, because I was down there meeting with the president of Guatemala and the Congress a month ago. And I know how much they do not like the Marxist inclinations of the United States and how it's destabilized Central America by inviting anarchy into their own backyard. So do we have, what do we have on this segment here, Mercedes, that can enlighten us?
I mean, if it's me, I think we only have a minute left, so I'd love to talk about the fact that Vice President Kamala Harris went down there and she was greeted with protesters, which I just love, because to your point, there's such a large Christian active group down there who are anti-socialists, all sorts of stuff. And so she's greeted by all these protesters. And of course, she's down there because she was tapped by Biden just 11 weeks ago and tasked with dealing with the border surge. But yet she's failed to show up to the border. Where is she, though? Guatemala, Mexico this week, meeting with leaders there. And I'm looking forward to seeing it in the next segment, because Guatemala, the president there gives her a piece of his mind as to what really are the root causes behind the migration surge.
Yeah, this is important, basically. This president's not, listen, the president met with church leaders and said, if you guys get a backbone and you'll stand up, I'll be a conservative president for you. But you've got to show up, because the politicians need they need a courageous community of people standing behind them. You can't send them into battle and not back them up. But they're backing up this president, and he's pushing back on the United States.